A very warm welcome to attendees of the World Water Week. Dear friends and colleagues, dear ladies and gentlemen, welcome the audience here and also welcome everyone online. In March of next year, the world will come together during the UN 2023 Water Conference in New York. And I'm very excited that this conference, for the first time since 1977, will focus on water. And it's an opportunity to solve today's water-related problems. And today with me here, I have the co-hosts of the conference, Mr. Sulton Rahimzoda, Special Envoy of the President of the Republic of Tajikistan on Water Affairs, and Mr. Henk Ovink, Special Envoy, International Water Affairs, Kingdom of the Netherlands, and Mrs. Madhushri Chatterjee of UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, the Secretariat of the conference. Welcome. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
So the Republic of Tajikistan and the Kingdom of the Netherlands, you are closely working together to prepare for this conference in March of next year. And as I've understood, you're traveling the world together to sort of unite the world for this conference. And you have, Henk, you referred to Sultan as your water brother.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we are. Yeah.
That's great.
Becoming.
That's very good.
Close family.
So, Ms. Rahimzoda Sultan, if I may, how is this collaboration going? Could you tell us more why you two are such a good match? Why the Netherlands and Tajikistan are doing this together? And what does it take to sort of tackle the global water crisis together?
Yeah, thank you very much having us in this talk show and highlighting once again the water united us, basically, Tajikistan and the Netherlands. And it is good example, basically, how water can unite all of the world, how the water can connect countries, peoples, but also cultures and natures. Because Tajikistan and the Netherlands, so different country in different geographical, climatic and economical conditions, but we are cooperating very nicely towards the water conference in 2023. And we are different also, we are upstream, the Netherlands is a downstream countries, developed country, developing country, from source to sea. Yes, we really cover almost all the water issues, starting from the mountains until the deltas. Having in Tajikistan, for example, the intensive glacier melting, floods, droughts, agriculture using of water for energy, hydropower, and also, I mean, the problem of the floods and droughts we are observing these days. So we're almost covering all the water factors and water challenges in our cooperation. But at the same time, as I mentioned, developed country and developing country. So we are connecting also now and covering basically the problems faced by the developing countries and the least developed countries. But also we are observing that even the developed countries are facing the same challenge. So this way, I think that having this cooperation and partnership, we can bring to the agenda of the 2023 conference almost all the topics related with water, but also the challenge that developed and developing world are facing. So that is basically a good opportunity for us. We are doing our best, to make this conference watershed moment for the world, but also uniting all the whole world around the water.
Thank you so much. And Henk, do you want to add something?
What can I add? Sultan really lists all the opportunities that come with this partnership. What I perhaps can add is that the challenges the world faces on the issues of water, too much, too little, polluted, we see in our two countries exposed. And it also brings to the table what solutions can be. And I think the partnership shows that a systemic approach, like Sultan said, from source to sea, really understanding systemic challenges, how social, environmental, cultural, and economic issues are in need of good governance, capacity, innovation, best finance, and of course, an enabling environment that can help drive actions towards next year's conference and beyond is of critical need. And I think the partnership, perhaps, we're geographically far away, culturally different, but in what we face and how we see opportunities move ahead, we are close friends. And that is what we want to bring also to the conference, that the differences can be overcome by looking at systemically. If only we have this very high ambition, because systems approach is complex and the world doesn't like complexity. But I think we show that if you embrace that complexity, it becomes the best opportunity to tackle the SDG challenge that we face. We say, invest in water, you serve all SDGs. If you do it towards 2023, it becomes a catalyst for change.
Thank you. And Madhu, do you want to add something here?
Sure, and thank you for the invitation. So as the Secretariat, our responsibility is really to bring the world together, if you will, also guided by the two co-hosts. So, the co-hosts have been very clear from the very beginning that this should be a very inclusive conference, inclusive in terms of getting vulnerable people on board, getting women, children, the disabled, indigenous groups onto the floor, if you will, to participate. So we are striving our best to do that. And of course, to bring the whole UN system family together, especially those working in the water arena. So that's our goal for now. And, we are very pleased to be doing this. This is also the norm for most UN conferences, but here we are at a critical moment and we'll do our best to support the co-hosts in their vision.
Very exciting. Thank you for that. And as I mentioned in the beginning, the UN 2023 Water Conference is the first UN conference on water since 1977. And in other words, it's the second UN conference on water ever. For the first time in almost 50 years, the world gathers to collectively decide on measures to help the global water crisis. Why is it so important to have this conference now? And I'll start with you, Henk.
Yeah, we know conferences don't change the world, so why have a conference? And we also know that water has no agreement at the level of the UN, so there's nothing to negotiate about. So why then bring the world together? There are many reasons. We are at a critical point in time where, looking at the SDGs and the Paris Agreement, we lag way behind. So the picture is very bleak. So before you know, it becomes very depressing, such a conference. While it's challenging to organize and unite the world, looking at the challenges, it's not a nice picture. And that is exactly why this conference is so important, because water provides the world with the alternative. If we look through the lens of water, we can help provide health security. We can help develop cities more sustainably and more resilient. We provide an alternative for agriculture that is eating or drinking up all our waters. So invest in water, as said, really trickles down across every sustainable development goal and becomes a catalyst for the change we so much seek. So the conference itself is not about the negotiation. The conference is about the commitments and the partnership. And I think at this time, geopolitical challenges on sustainability and climate, this providing an alternative as well as an alternative route towards best practices, coalitions of the willing, and those interventions, being them projects, being them policy, being them capacity, knowledge, data, that really show that we can deliver on that promise, and that if we scale and replicate those deliverables, the world will be not that bleak future, but actually great. So I think the conference comes at the right time. At the same time, with that ambition and that moment, the stakes are high. And I said before, April 1st, after the conference, should not become our Fool's Day. On April 1st, we should look in the mirror and take pride. So it is more or less a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to unite the world for water, for the Sustainable Development Goals and our climate action.
And Sulton, do you agree with Henk here?
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, you already said that it's very historical in terms of the time dimension, because it is the first one after almost 50 years. But Tajikistan and the Netherlands, as co-chairs, we are striving we are doing our best to make historical, not because of the time dimension, but because of its impacts, because of its results. And definitely it is time, because when you look at the SDG 6 achievement, so we are quite, you said, we are not on track, basically. And if 3-4 years ago we were talking about the doubling our efforts to achieve SDG 6, now we are saying about the quadruple efforts. So we need to increase our efforts 4 times to achieve SDG 6 and other water-related goals. And unfortunately, climate change impact, population growth, growing demand for water resources, they are basically worsening the situation year by year. And we have to act now, and that's why we are requesting, calling for actions, which is really needed now, but even yesterday, we have to say. It's the right time to have this conference, but again, with good results.
Thank you. Hearing you talk about the global crisis, the challenges the world faces, its impact on the planet, and also the impact on the most vulnerable communities, what drives you to pick up this pioneering role? Why do you think this conference can actually make a difference? Some would even say, why try? How would you respond to this, Sulton?
We have to, because as I mentioned, so there is no time to wait another 46 or 50 years to have another conference. And we basically started with 3 main principles. It's inclusive, action-oriented, and the cross-sectoral. So, I mean, the inclusivity is mean not leaving anyone behind. We have to not try, we have to our best, basically, to have the good results after the conference. That's why we launched, basically, Water Action Agenda and calling the world community, starting from the governments, political leaders, until the individuals, coming to the conference with concrete commitments for actions which help us to accelerate and catalyze actions, new actions, transformative actions, and innovative actions to help us to achieve SDG 6 and other water-related goals.
Great. And Henk, do you want to add something?
It's a time where we need to believe that hope is real. As said, the challenges are so massive, and the divide in the world becomes often bigger. If we look at the challenges and how to address them, we look at how we disagree instead of where we agree. And in that sense, I think there is a real opportunity that this conference is not about the negotiation, but really seeking partnership. There's a big difference between negotiation and collaboration. And the good thing of that is that leading up to the conference itself, and beyond the conference towards implementation, scale, and replication, we want to provide this safe space, safe space where we can build trust among those that trust each other less, increase the partnerships that are already there and strengthen them with the courage we need in this contested space. And not, again, as said, provide the alternative. Water can drive us apart easily, and we see it across the world. By pollution, droughts, the scarcity, and the way it impacts our economies and environments and cultures that we see with too much water, with floods and sea level rise and so forth. And we see every example of that every day, everywhere and around the world. You can't say this place is vulnerable for this and that for that. No, we're all vulnerable in that same space. In that sense, the conference gives the opportunity and the co-host feel the responsibility to organize this safe space, to bring all of us together, the ones that are organized, the institutions, public and private, and the ones that are not organized or lesser organized and are most vulnerable, and especially have a focus on the youth and the next generation, because this is a conference for the future, not for the past. So we have to try. This is our moment, and we can't escape, which is actually the lucky thing, and at the same time creating this space for innovation and capacity building and building these coalitions. I see it as a real opportunity. I'm encouraged in the conversations here in Stockholm, especially by the young and the youth, that they bring to the table the provocation. This is what needs to be done, but also the partnership. And I think it's exactly what the conference also wants to provide, a provocation to the world, but in a way that it shows the alternative in a partnership.
Well, thank you. Very inspiring. And Madhu, do you think this conference will make a difference?
Yes, absolutely. I think it should.
Yes.
I am the secretariat, and I'm sitting right in between the two co-hosts. So, of
We're very happy.
I think it will. And let's just step back and look at it within the context of the 2030 agenda as well. You see, the 2030 agenda spoke to both developing and developed countries, not just developing countries. And it was holistic and also an integrated agenda, which means you have to look at issues, including SDG 6, in a more cross-sectoral approach. So Sultan mentioned, commitments. So we are going to encourage everyone to come with commitments to the conference, and it doesn't end there. We have to feed into the other intergovernmental processes that are coming forward. For instance, we have the Cairo Water Week next week. We can feed some messages, what happened here in SWW, into the week next week. And then, of course, you have COP27 coming up and so on and so forth. So, this message about the conference can and should filter into all the intergovernmental processes. And it doesn't stop here. But we have to also bear in mind that within 6 years, the decade will end, the Water Action Decade, and within another 8 years, the deadline for the 2030 agenda is also coming up. So there has to be also a sense of urgency, which I think has gathered momentum.
Great, thank you. Water is broad and cannot be addressed in isolation. That is something you've said before. And why is that? And how do you envision to incorporate this in the conference? Henk, what's your answer to this?
It's my strong belief that nothing can be addressed in isolation, or better not, because often we come up with the worst solutions in isolation. So partnerships, inclusion, working with all across sectors and silos across the world is critical important for everything. Water provides an opportunity for that partnership, because water is linked to every SDG, to everything in life. When you talk about health, you talk about water. When you talk about food security, you talk about water. When you talk about security at large, you talk about water, urban development, climate change, etc., etc. Health, for instance, we come from this pandemic we're in the midst of, although we find ourselves here in a very amazing space together. We know WASH, as a first line of defense, is lacking still for billions in the world. But health goes beyond human health. It's planetary health. So the health of our people is connected directly to the health of our biodiversity. And water plays a key role in both. And the same goes for climate. If we invest in water, you see it coming back in mitigation, carbon sinks, nature-based solutions, providing an alternative for all those carbon-related projects, as well as for adaptation, providing resiliency, strengthening our ecosystem and our environment and our societies. Water is there for the most vulnerable first, for the young and the ones that live in contested and challenged regions, as it is there for the haves and the opportunities that innovation and technological innovation can actually bring. So I think water provides us for this connective space, and in that sense, the opportunity to act upon.
Great, thank you. Sultan, do you want to add something here?
I think that the just simple thing, it's water is source of our life. Water is everywhere. You look at the agriculture, food sector, energy sector, environment, industry, everywhere. Without water, we cannot have any progress, any development. That's why it was mentioned, I think, in the future we want the outcome document of the Rio +20 conference in 2012. Water sits at the core of the sustainable development. And if you look at the SDGs, so all related with water almost. And we are saying that SDG 6, achievement of the SDG 6 goals will help us to achieve also the other SDGs. So that's why we are trying for the conference also to cover basically all these themes. That's why basically, and we had a wide consultation with the member states, with stakeholders. It was launched by UNDESA about the themes for the 5 interactive dialogues of the conference. And now, based on those consultations we had, based on those ideas we received from the member states and different stakeholders, we prepared basically the themes of the interactive dialogues, which basically covers, as you mentioned, almost all the sectors. Water for health, it is about WASH, about the human right to safe drinking and water supply, about the COVID crisis, The second is water for development. It's about the nexus, about the volume water, about the IWRM. And then third is water for climate and environment, including the DRR and those elements which basically related with water and adaptation, climate resilience, and etc. The fourth is water for cooperation. I think it's very important because it's not only cooperation on transboundary level, but cooperation between the sectors, cooperation between the science and the policy, cooperation between all the SDGs, basically, which help us. And the fifth one is Water Action Decade itself, because it's a midterm review of the International Decade for Action Water for Sustainable Development. And the SG has its plan for implementation of this decade. And we are trying basically to cover almost all the areas related with water in this conference.
Great, great. Well, now we know a little bit more about why there is this urgency to have this conference and that we cannot solve these issues in isolation, as you said earlier, and also just not in the water sector alone. So could you tell me a little bit about your vision to truly create this watershed moment? How can this conference bring transformative and systemic change? Let's start with you, Sulton.
In Dushanbe conference, which was basically one of the milestones toward the 2023 conference, we hosted it in Dushanbe this June. We launched Water Action Agenda. Water Action Agenda is one of the outcomes of this conference. And Henk mentioned that the conference will not have negotiated document, but as it was mentioned, the co-chairs striving to make the conference watershed moment for the world. How? And then we launched this Water Action Agenda basically to bring together all the commitments from around the world, small and big, and transformative, innovative. And then our understanding that having all these actions, having all these commitments, we will have an opportunity to make this kind of change. And our idea also to find the good examples of those commitments, of those actions, which could be basically scaled up, which could be built around it. We could build the partnership and coalitions to make this change.
Great. And Henk, what do you want to add on this?
Yeah, I think that this is exactly what Sultan says. What do you do with a conference without a negotiation where voluntary commitments are the only thing you can get? And before you know it, you get a pile of commitments where you don't see the difference between what you had before and after. That is the reason why we said we have to organize those commitments, bring them together, but also support the implementation, scaling, and replication. And this comes in many forms, like Sultan also says. We imagine that the conference should and can empower many around the world by bringing smaller scale commitments from a school in New York or in Chile or in Bangladesh and help drive their commitments in a cultural way and make connections. Smaller scale commitments that are empowered by the conference and empowered by the attention and the spotlight. At the same time, we want institutional commitments from private sector, from governments, NGOs, academia, and across, and those partnerships. And this should be a main focus because the scale and the impact of those commitments should help us get on track. This is a responsibility for the world. We feel this responsibility as co-host to chase and drive our colleague member states, our partners in the private sector, in the finance sector, our MDBs and partners across, to really come forward in these coalitions with commitments that really make a dent in the context where we need it. And that's the hardest part because we haven't done this thus far. And those commitments should not be a replication of the past, but really a representation of the future. And the last layer are systemic change. What are the game changers? The 1, 2, 3, or 4 there that really hurt, because a game changer hurts, but where the Water Action Agenda provides comfort for that systemic change and helps drive that systemic change towards implementation and again replication and scale. And this is exactly what we aim for. And we really, that's our ambition. That's what we put on the table. This is what we want to agree on in March. But also that's what we want to make a success post-March.
Thank you so much. Madhu, you want to add something here?
I'd like to add a little bit about the process.
Yes,
Because we have a dedicated website for the conference now, and there is also a registry which is now open where all stakeholders, including member states and UN system, can make their commitments, can put it in the system so that then we can go back and look at them and publish them online. We already have a few actually, but we would like to see many more. And substantively, to what Henk said, I'd like to also add that, we are looking at cross-sectoral issues, right? So if these commitments could actually, let me backtrack, when stakeholders are making these commitments, if they can actually think about how they can leverage the interlinkages between SDG 6 and say other SDGs, and then think of a commitment, I think we would have a little bit more impact. And also if these commitments are also grounded in evidence, data and science, then perhaps it would be a little bit more, effective, because then we can look at data, we can look at some baselines and then think about forward implementation.
Great, thank you. And I know that your plan is to have this conference to be truly inclusive. That's one goal you have. And what would you like to tell everyone who is watching this afternoon and also here in the audience? How can everyone here play their part? Sulton.
Tajikistan and the Netherlands as co-chairs, we already mentioned several times, so we are striving to make this conference historical because of its impact, its results, to make this conference successful, to make this conference a watershed moment for the world. But we cannot do it alone. Tajikistan, Netherlands, UNDESA, UN Water, so we cannot have this success without the support of the whole world. So that's why we used opportunity of different platforms basically to call, joining us in this process. And my message today, please be united. Please be united around water for water in 2023 conference and come with commitments for actions. Join us, please, in this process.
Great, thank you. And Henk, you want to add something there?
Yeah, what can I add more than this call to join? I think we want to emphasize that especially. And of course, that is not always easy for many around the world. So what we aim for is support to the ones that might not be heard first, within their regions, within their constituencies, within their communities, to make sure to seek partnerships that we can then support, to come to the conference or provide input already now. So inclusivity really is from now, or yesterday I should say, towards the conference to make every voice heard towards that conference. So within the preparation and in the preparation, really in the partnership of that, everybody already finds a space. At the conference itself, being it inclusive, in the conference, in the dialogues, in the side events, but also around it in New York City, organizing many cultural events with schools and NGOs and private sector and beyond. And of course, after the conference, in the implementation of these commitments to make sure that this is not, blue washing what we're already doing, but really changing the way how we are doing, by bringing everybody in and continuing to create an opportunity for building trust and capacity across communities and beyond. And I think this is not only our ambition, this is also where we feel really accountable. Inclusivity is very hard. If you say the door is always open, you have to deliver on that promise. It's not easy, so make sure that we hear where it's harder, so we can work harder to make it possible.
Great. And before we run out of time, I think we have 1 minute left. So 30 seconds each here. What are your personal hopes and dreams when it comes to reaching SDG 6? We'll start with you, Madhu.
That's a tough one, but I'll talk about my dream. My dream would be actually that the work that we have to start after the conference, we start in earnest, because you have all these dialogues, you have all these commitments, but what happens to these commitments? What are we doing to implement them? So if we can see some meaningful partnerships happen in the conference space, which we can move forward to ensure implementation on the ground, even if it's like 3 commitments, I would be very happy. So,
Thank you. And Sultan, what are your personal dreams and hopes?
Really difficult to answer, but my understanding that this conference is hope for many people around the world. And we are honored, of course, with the Netherlands to co-chair this process, but it is really a very big responsibility. And my dream in this process, basically, to have successful conference and then to work together for implementation, to follow up those actions we will have within this conference.
Thank you. And over to you, Henk. What are your personal dreams and hopes when it comes to this, reaching the SG6?
So I think what Sultan said is really important. We are building a friendship and a partnership that shows that you should not be afraid of the challenges we face. I see a lot of fear because the challenges only increase. And that fear leads to a lock-in institutionally and politically. And when you are there, you don't see the alternative anymore. And I think what we show here in the partnership with Tajikistan and the Netherlands and our many, many partners with the support of UNDESA and UN Water, that we should not be afraid to reach out and hold hands together. We should not be afraid of the complexity of the challenges. And we should be inspired by the opportunity water and working on water and this conference brings. And I think beyond fear into hope and opportunity, I think this conference can bring. We're dedicated not only here, but definitely by our hearts to make it a success. And this is why this friendship was also hopefully an inspiration for others to come forward and join us in this collective effort to not only make the conference a success, but the impact and the rippling effect that we actually foresee.
Thank you. Thank you for your hard work and your inspiration, sharing your inspiration here today. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I think great.
Thank you
so
very
much and good luck.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Nice to meet you. Thank you so much.